Welcome to this recap video of the third and last round of Season 9 of Crazyhouse Teamleague. As in the previous two videos, I'm gonna analyze my own two games, and then there are some puzzles for you and some positions for you to look at as in the first and the second round as well. And I'll share the study link in the description of this video and go check it out. And if you like the games and the positions, you can let me know in the chat over there. But let's go to our first game of this recap, and that's me playing with the black pieces versus the finisher. And can skip through some of the opening moves. Usually he plays with bishop b5 and knight e2 against me. But here he went for something other than that. But it's all good. We got a normal line. I got bishop b4. And this is all very theoretical. And somewhere along the lines, I'm sure he knows more than me. And if you're interested in these lines, where you can sack the queen with white and black has some sort of counterplay, or at least tries to get counterplay, go check it out in the opening Explorer. You can see there are like 2,000 games, and I think I have it on 2200, 2500 only. So that's a lot of games to go through and to look at the ideas in these openings. And of course you can also use the computer. So I took the queen, he took the queen back, and at e4 at knight e5, and here I didn't really remember what to do or what the best move to play is. So I figured let's take the bishop because well, okay, the finisher is not gonna fall for this, but let's say something like this. There's always this threat you have to be aware of by black. So he takes the knight, and that threat is never there anymore. And here I took the bishop on d8, which is not a very good move, but it seemed logical to me. It defends some squares around my king, but especially his next two, three moves are very logical, and I'm in a lot of trouble. So in the next game I will have to play something else. For example, a move like queen at g6 seems to be an idea here. And you just leave the bishop on d8 for a long period of time. Something like this can happen. This is a game played between the finisher and Blitzer, as you can see. So this is already played once, and here take the pawn on c2. And it looks very dangerous, and maybe very dangerous as well, but for the moment it seems like black can survive, and he has some counterplay around the white king. Okay, so I played knight takes d8, he played rook takes d3, and then I went queen at g4 to create some play against the white king maybe in the future, with knight e2 and stuff like that. I threatened to take the knight on g3, and you cannot cover it like this because of knight e2. But I missed his very strong counter idea, and that is just letting this knight be on g5 and going straight for mate with pawn at f6. And pawn at f6 was a very strong move. And from here on I was playing a losing game, and he executed very nicely. Bishop at f8 and f takes g7. For a moment I was thinking here maybe I have some weirdness. Maybe I should implement the check, or I was trying to figure out how to make something happen. I also thought maybe this, and then he takes here, and then maybe there is some knight at e2 and queen sacrifice, but he just plays knight at f6 here, and I have no attack, and he is winning with the two queens. It's the most safe option. There's no counterplay at all. So quickly discarded that option and just decided to take on g7. He played at f6, renewing the threat, and I went ahead and tried to defend it with the bishop on d6, and maybe it can also be useful taking h2 later on. So he immediately attacked the bishop and the gutter of e7. And here there was a slight chance for me to get back in the game somewhat with the move knight at f5. And white is still better, but black is guarding some key squares with this knight, and it may be useful in the attack later. A sample line here can be bishop at h3, queen takes g5, knight takes d6, c takes d6. And if white decides here to take on f5, which seems reasonable because then you have mate on e7, and knight at c7 and knight at g7, a lot of threats. Black can play queen takes g2, knight at h4, and take again on f5. And white is winning. Still, white is still better, but you can imagine with the king on h3, stuff can go wrong maybe for white. I won't say that the finisher will lose this. You probably still win it, but there are blunders possible here. So it's some last chance I could have gone for. But I just played knight c6 to cover e7 twice, and if he takes the bishop, I'm still covered there. He played queen at g7, took the defender of f8 and sacked his queen because he has a nice motif here. Rook at h8, and there's only one move, okay, two moves, but you have to block on g8. And bishop at h6, and then you have to move, and white gets a free piece. So he already got another piece for the queen. King d7, if I don't want to lose another piece on f8. And here he just played a very calm bishop at g3. Making sure he's not mated. You can see he has 40 seconds left. He doesn't want to get into time trouble with an open king. I tried to make something of it by playing pawn at e2 and queen at d1, but he just assessed that bishop at e1. He played this move within a second, I think, or at least very quickly, and he went on to finish the game with knight takes h7, and now it's forced mate in a couple of moves. I took the bishop, but he mated me. Okay, so the finisher took the first game. And then we went on to the second one. Oops, spoiler alert. That's not what happened in the game, by the way. So we got d4. He played d5, knight c3, knight f6, and bishop g5 and h6. And I immediately took on f6. There's also a lot of games with bishop h4. But I think he is one of the players who will play g5 there. And I think he knows more what to do in these situations than, at least I've seen a couple of games of him with this setup. And I'm more familiar with the plans in taking the knight. I did mess up the move order a bit, because I should have played bishop d3 first and then developed the knight to e2. But I went for knight at f4 first, and a very logical response here is bishop a5 to pin the knight, so d5 is no longer under attack. And now I went bishop d3, and here he played knight b4, which is not a bad move because it gives you the option to trade away the good bishop here, which is looking at your king. But he had a nice concept here, which is bishop a3. And if I take, you can take the knight and maybe the rook next, or maybe the bishop on d2. You can just pick, and white structure on the queen side is ruined. But maybe he spotted this but felt like I'm a bit afraid of knight h5 and g7 gets weak. So maybe he saw the idea but just decided to go for knight b4 anyway. Okay, now we can play knight ge2, and now the setup is working for white again. Only the bishop can be taken, but that's what happens in these types of games. Bishop d6 was played, I castled, he's fortified d5. And I went to play knight g3, and I want to go knight f or g to h5 to attack the pawn on g7. So he went bishop a7, bishop ac7, because the bishop is not doing anything on a5. You need it here and make good use of it, maybe on the diagonal. I went to h5, he castled, and here I decided to sacrifice the knight. Couldn't really help myself because I know it's probably not the best move, but it gives me a lot of practical chances. And he first took the bishop because he realized that if he took the knight first, this may be very annoying. Let's say here. Now I can take on d5. And if you take here, I take on f6. And if you take the knight, I have 2 pawns to mate. And if you go to h8 first, I can of course play this move, and then it sort of transposes, but it's probably even stronger this way. Okay, so he took the bishop on d3 here. Knight takes d3. Took back with the pawn. If I take with the queen, he's gonna play bishop at g6 at a certain moment anyway, so that only wins the tempo on my queen. So I took with the pawn. And also maybe I'm looking at e4 ideas later on. He took the knight. Then I decided to keep these bishops out of play and play f4. He used that fact to play bishop at g4, and he moved the king to h7, where it's not vulnerable to any pawn drops here, and taking on f6 would check, nor any knight at h5 checks. It's just a safe square for the king. And also he maybe in the future looks at rook g8 and activate the rook. So I had to find a plan here, and it was a bit hard what to do, so I decided to just throw some pieces at him. I went pawn at a5, and he didn't indulge me by taking and trading a lot of stuff. He just went back to e7, rook ae1, and here he finally went for knight at h4, which was there for a couple of moves already. And when the knight is in front of the king like this, usually the attacking party can get a knight on h4, and it's very hard to kick this knight away, while it's very annoying that the knight is there. So knight at h4 is a good move. We traded on f6 because I wanted to grab another hold of the e5 square, and now I played e4. Idea to go f5 and maybe pawn at g6, and the queen's opening up as well. So maybe there's something there. He grabbed some material with pawn at f3 and knight takes f3. And black is probably better here. But I tried to create some counter chances. I went pawn at f4. But he was playing very nicely up until this moment. So as you can see, I'm down to 16 seconds. And I just thought, okay, I'll just grab material and hope for the best here. He went king g8 here, and it allowed me to open up his position a bit. And the pawns are coming there, but his king is still very safe. So okay, I thought I had to defend a bit. I played rook f1, maybe I can take the bishop and grab some more material. I'm playing on the increment of 5 seconds, as you can see, but he is as well. So it's a very tense situation. He gave up the rook for the queen and the bishop, but if I take the bishop, knight at e3 comes, for example, and that's gonna be game over soon. Or pawn at f3, I'm not sure which one is better. So I cannot take the bishop, that's the conclusion. So I went knight at g5, He took, I took again, and here he made a mistake by going queen takes g5, but it was not so easy to spot why it was a mistake. At g6 comes, this is all still good, f takes g6 and queen takes g6, and here I had to go f8 knight. But the problem was I couldn't see the mate, but there is a mate in the position with f8 knight. And it's a very beautiful one. Okay, so the king has a couple of moves, but the first one is king g8. Seems logical, but all of them are checkmate. That's what I was about to say. Let's finish my thought there. So rook at h8, king g7, rook at h7, queen takes, rook takes, and the king has to move. And knight h5 is mate. Queen at f7 is also mate, but knight h5 works as well. And king g7, there is a rook at f7, queen takes f7, rook at h7, and next you can take the queen with check. If the rook moves if he goes here, and if the king goes here, then you take with the pawn. And it's checkmate as well. But yeah, in time trouble I couldn't work out the variations, so I played rook at h5, and the game sort of ended in an anticlimax here because the finisher thought he was losing, but black is winning here. And but the finisher couldn't find a move to play here, and he forfeited on time. Luckily for him, his team won the match, and therefore also the season. Season 9 is won by Zomba Awamba, with the finisher Terra87, Blykind, JR Paddy, Marlon, C, Zerza, and Adande1. And we didn't manage to win against that team in this round, so we got second place in season 9 of the Crazyhouse Team League. I hope you enjoyed these recaps, and I hope to see you soon on stream. Do follow me on Twitch if you are not following already. Have a good day. Bye bye.